Oh yeah, these morning shows are not for me. Not for me. But I promised, and I'm here. So let's get on with talking about Arteta, Runarsson, and Martinelli. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction series, a show in which we react to the latest Arsenal news and get your thoughts in the chat box. I'm awake. I've had orange juice. I've had my hot cross buns, which if you haven't had before, you should do. They're like the best breakfast ever. But we're here to talk about Arteta's press conference. Of course, you joined me yesterday after the game, straight afterwards, and it was quite raw, hence the name of the show. But it was very much a case of the press conference wasn't starting very quickly. And so I thought it'd be a best idea to come on this morning and after a night of reflection and then talk about it and go through it with you guys in the chat box. Thank you so much, everyone that's tuning in at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is great on a Wednesday. Fair play to you guys. If you're in the UK, of course. If you're in America, what the hell are you doing? Go to bed. And if you're in the East, good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day. So we're going to answer some of your questions a little bit later on, but we're going to go through the press conference first. Good morning, Owen, Toby, Goose, Dubo, Nath, Peter, Omar. Afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in. Owen likes these morning shows. Well, at least there's someone that does. Anyway, let's go through the press conference. So I'm on Football London, which is where you should go if you want any of your press conference live updates, because I can't find anywhere else that really does it. Anyway, we won't read through it word for word, all of it, but I'm interested in some specific parts. So when he's asked to reflect on the performance, he says, yeah, it's a really painful moment. Again, we started the game conceding really early. Classic. He didn't say that. A really soft goal. And after that, in this moment, to get through that is obviously difficult. But the players reacted, to be fair, and we started to grow as the game was moving forward. And we scored a goal. A really good goal. And after that, I think we were the better team for about 25 minutes. And I talked about that yesterday on yesterday's show. Between City's first and second goal, Arsenal were certainly the better side in the game. And that's positive. It's annoying that it ended with the annoying conceding of that free kick and then whatever happened after it. We don't need to go specifically too much into that, but it is what it is. But what I will say is a positive from the game was that period between the first and second City goal where we did score. I thought we were the better side for sure, and that's a positive. I mean, what you need to think about is that I know a lot of people are frustrated, including myself, and you want to see the manager gone, and that's fair enough. But try, because we know that he's not going to be going anywhere really, to appreciate that there are some things we can take from this game that we couldn't take from previous ones. That it looked to me like a slight turn, but what is annoying is that there was a lot of the players on the pitch that won't be playing against Chelsea. Some for injuries, some for rotation, some because they don't feel they deserve it right now. But we'll have to wait and see what is said ultimately. So getting on to the... I mean, let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat before we go on to that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, hello. Owen says, can't be decent for 20% of a game. Imagine being decent 20% of a skydive. I mean, you're not wrong, Owen. You're not wrong. It'd be a pretty cataclysmic skydive if it was bad for 80% of it. All I'm saying is imagine that the first 5 people who jumped out the plane were 100% bad, splat. But the 20% that you had showed signs of improvement. So if you're like the 5th guy in the plane ready to go and the guy that's 5 places in front of you has had a 20% good one, you'd hope that gradually by the time it gets to you, you might be 50-50 by that point. It's a terrible analogy. But I get what you're saying. All I'm trying to do is look for the positives in a very, very poor situation. Saeed says, Tom, aren't you afraid if we change another manager, the same thing is going to happen like Emery and Arteta? Of course I am. Of course I am, Saeed. And I think I've raised that point before. I said that if you do change the manager, there are no guarantees that this changes. All I've said in regards to changing the manager is that I just felt that you can only allow this to go on for so long. I'm fully behind the guy. Like, I want him to succeed. I want him to turn things around. But if you continue to lose games, it gets to a point where it is untenable, where you have to make a change because you can't sack the whole team, but you can change the manager. And that is just the way football is. So whilst I completely understand your point of view, Saeed, and I agree with it, sometimes you do and are forced into making a change because there is just really no other option. Gary says, another fantastic post-match interview. Thanks, mate. I mean, I know that you're being sarcastic in regards to what Arteta is saying. Let's get on with some more of what he said. And morning, Joe. Good to have on the show again, as always. Sorry, midnight. I'm afraid this is a bit of torture for you. Martinelli's injury, is it anything to do with what was wrong with him before? Is it something new? He says, no. It was just a really bad kick on his shin, and it was swelling up, and he was in pain and came off. When it happened, I know a lot of people reacted very, very worryingly, expectantly, because of the injury that he's obviously just had. What I kind of look at it as, I don't think it's too serious. I'm basing that on completely nothing other than my observations last night. And I have a bit of a feeling that it was a bit of, in a way, a bit of a PTSD moment from his long-term injury. When you've been out for that long and you go into a tackle and you feel pain, probably like he did, you immediately go worst case scenario. I'm going to be out again. I'm gone. And that's why I think as a young kid, which he still is at 19, that he reacted in that way. If your livelihood is playing football and you've missed 9 months or whatever it is of it, you go back into your first full start and then you feel that pain after a big impact challenge. I'm not surprised that he reacted like he did. But I'm interested to know kind of how this affects him going forwards. Is it too serious? We hope not. But my feeling is that it's not too bad. But I don't expect him to be playing against Chelsea. I mean, David Luiz had a cut on his head and he missed 2 to 3 weeks of football. So if it's on your leg, which is obviously something you use a lot more in football than your head, it might be different. But that's based on complete conjecture. That was a terrible mistake from the keeper, wasn't it? What a question. That was a terrible mistake. I want to highlight it again. It must be difficult for him to come back from that. Arteta says, it is, but we win and lose together. Alex has played other games. We decided to play him tonight for lots of reasons, and that's it. The responsibility is for us all. And then they ask about Emile Martinez. Is there any regret in letting Emile go? Now, I understand asking the question, but I understand the question, and I think it's a point that's worth discussion. But in terms of asking the coach who's let the guy go, what kind of answer are we going to expect from that? Are we going to expect him to turn around and go, yes, I wish I hadn't sold him. He's better than Leno. No. And so that's why he says it's no point having any regrets or not. There was different reasons why we had to do that transaction. We did it, and it's part of the past. Emile had a great few months last season. He really helped us. And obviously when a goalkeeper makes an error, these things are going to come up, which is completely understandable. What I don't get, though, is that I understand if this was about Leno and like Leno made a mistake, because Martinez is way above Runarsson. Like he's a much, much, much better keeper than Runarsson. It was a case at Arsenal where we had 2 very good keepers and one of them or both of them were going to want to play. And so as soon as the club came in with a sizable bid, which Aston Villa did, he was always going to go because Leno didn't have anyone coming in for him, even though, and it would have cost more to take Leno from the club. So I'm not surprised that it went down the way it did at all. I would have rather that Martinez was Arsenal's keeper. Do not get me wrong. But I understand why the situation went the way that it did, which I think is ultimately the key thing. You made 8 changes tonight. Was that through necessity because of fixtures you've got coming up? And he says it was a combination of the amount of games that some of them have played, some injuries that we have at the moment, and players that could not even be involved tonight. And others because there are players who deserved to play. I mean, what's really irritating is that Willian was nowhere to be seen, which is usually a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But what's worrying is that Willian's going to be in this team for Saturday. That's almost a shoo-in with him not being anywhere near the team today. And Pepe obviously playing his 3rd game in a row, even though he came off the bench. But he played an entire half pretty much, and he's just played 2 starts as well. That's worrying for me. That Willian's probably going to play against Chelsea when he does not deserve to. After the first half performance that he put in, no matter the second, where he was a bit better, but the first half against Everton was sackable for a player. Utterly sackable. It was terrible. More on Martinelli. It says Gabriel Martinelli came off at the start of the second half, but the way we saw him running and chasing, is that an example to some of the other members of the squad? Yes, it should be the answer. He says, well, I think Gabby has a unique energy and a way to transmit his passion for the game. I think he plays the game in a different way to any other player, and we can't compare him. But what we have to say is that it's great to have him back, to bring that spirit and fight, and to play against an opponent the way he did in the first half. I think that's something to be really proud and happy with. What I would say is that what he should have said is that, yes, Gabriel Martinelli is, and it is something that is a little bit of an anomaly, the way that he plays, which is 100% of the time. But he should say that he's an example. He should say it's something that other players should look at and go, this guy cares 110% and he's fighting for every single ball, every single press. And it's something that I wish that the whole team could look to and try to emulate, which is very difficult because he's got a different energy to anyone else that I've ever seen in an Arsenal shirt over the last 10 years. But it still should have been something that was brought up to use as an example. And it's annoying that he said we can't compare him. You should compare him. You should look at him as an example. You really, really should. And it's a shame that he kind of backed out of that question. Going down, he comes off injured. Runnarsson's mistake. There's an offside goal. Does that sum up your luck at the moment? It is what we are fighting against, but we are going to keep fighting. There is not any other way. It's a really hard result to take, as we've said after the last however many. But as well, we have to look at things that can help us for the future. And I have to say, for the young players, it's in a really different scenario. They did really well. What was the logic for bringing Gabby back out for the second half? This should be interesting. Because he was pushing, saying that he was completely fine, that he wanted to carry on and he wanted to try. I am sorry, but you've just described the differing personality that Martinelli has. It should not be down to the player, the same as with Partey. Players want to play football, but it is down to the medical staff and the manager to make sensible decisions about what happens. What Arteta does there is just passes the buck, completely passes the buck, passes the blame from him onto Martinelli. Protect your player. We've got more important games. It's the reason why you rotated. So rest the guy. We need this kid. We desperately need this kid going forwards because he's an example to every other player. Do not risk him like you risked Partey. It doesn't matter if the player's saying he's 100%. If the instinct is telling you something. I mean, everyone at half-time on social media I saw was like, take him off. Take him off the pitch. This game is not important in terms of our season. A cup quarter-final in the League Cup is not important for our season against a Man City side that are going to end up winning anyway. We knew that. You could see it. Take him off at half-time. Don't make it worse. Don't make any more risks. It might have done nothing. It might not have made it any worse at all, but it could have done. And that's something that should have changed. And it's what's so irritating about Partey's situation and now Gabriel Martinelli's situation. It's so annoying to see these things happening over and over and over again. Yam Drum Gun says, huge problems at the club. We can talk. Nothing still gets done. Gary Hardy says, his energy reminds me of Alexis. That's true. And how he stood out in the team. Hopefully others will step up with him instead of the way that they didn't with Alexis. I know it'd be amazing if we'd had each of them in the team and we'd been able to play that press with both of those. That would be mental, wouldn't it? Matt Alexander says, what managers out there would you like to see replace Arteta? I like Rosa from Mönchengladbach. He's probably going to be going to Dortmund to replace Lucien Favre. As I've said all the time, Matt, if anyone's going to replace Arteta, I wish we'd just go into Southampton and take Hasenhüttl. That's my personal... that would be my preference for me. Peter Wilder says it might not have actually worsened the injury, but the message it sends with the action and the quote can't go over well with the players. Exactly. You need to protect them. Players are not medics. Players are desperate, especially Martinelli of all people, are desperate to play football. And you need to protect them sometimes. You look at Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp and look how annoyed Salah and Sadio Mane are when they're taken off the pitch as substitutes. But he's doing the right thing and he's protecting them. And it's a good thing that those players look annoyed when they come off the pitch because it shows that they care and they want to play it. They want to give their 110% for the team. But you need to protect your players. You need to go overawing in the egos, forget they exist, and use your managerial mastership to take the players off when they need to be taken off. And that was one of those times. Akene says, Tom, It's not the same injury. More so, we have a medical team that probably gave the go-ahead, and you heard obey the science, and that's what Arteta did. The thing is, Akene, is that I'd understand that if this was the first time, but it's not the first time. It's the second time that we've sent a player on after we were unsure about his fitness, and after we'd taken the advice of the player, which we know from both examples where Arteta has come out in press conferences and said that both Partey and now Martinelli said themselves they were fine, they were fit, and we sent them out anyway, and yet they came off injured. So I understand your point, Akene, but when the evidence is so much in the favour of what I'm saying, you can't ignore that. And that is what's really, really irritating. Is that about it? No, we're not done yet, nearly. You brought in a few centre-halves that haven't played, and there are a lot of questions on William Saliba and why he hasn't played. Why is that? He cannot be involved because he's not in the squad. He's not in the squad. I was under the impression that he was eligible for the EFL Cup games. No, we made the decision with him, and we will see what we are going to do in January. So is the plan to loan him out? We are talking about it. It's just like, Arteta just seems fed up of talking about Saliba, which I can understand. You might be fed up talking about someone that you've had questions asked about continuously, but it's because the fans want to know. It's because the fans care. It's because the fans had a lot of hope in this young 18, 19-year-old kid that has cost the club a lot of money, that the fans have sent in money through tickets, through merchandise, and we care about where the club's money gets spent. And when it's spent to the level that it's more money than we spent on Gabriel, on this guy, and you're not getting in the squads, and you've made the decision not to include him in the squad even though he was eligible, is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And it's just how Saliba has been treated is nothing short of a disgrace, to be honest. It's nothing short of a disgrace. No matter what you think about it, no matter what we don't know about it, the fact of the matter is either he should have been loaned out in the summer or he should have been used in the squad this season. That is a fact. There's no arguments. There's no, if you're really backing Arteta, which I've done and still continue to do in some aspects, but with Saliba, there is no excuse. There is no argument that argues his situation of how it's been handled. I have arguments to say why he may not have been included in the squad this season. Now he's available, but there are no excuses for not sending him out on loan. Absolutely none at all. Especially considering that Saint-Etienne had sorted all of their side of things with the player, with the agent, and with us. And it was us that let that down. You just need to go and listen to Claude Puel, who is the Saint-Etienne manager's comments on the situation. Arsenal did not complete their side of the deal when it came to the returning on loan for this season at Saint-Etienne, and it's a joke that it didn't. It's an absolute joke. Owen says, we've left the dictatorship in the form of Wenger only to enter another one with Arteta and Edu. Two inexperienced people in positions of power that seem to be too agreeable. Concerning. Peter Wilder says, him being fed up is fine, but no one would be in this situation if a bit of transparency was present. Gary Hardy says, apparently Saliba's lawyer is meeting Edu this week. His agent is, yes, not his lawyer. I think that's just a lost in translation sort of thing. It came out of French media. It is his agent that's flying in. JMC says they're not getting rid of the players we know are not good enough, like Lacazette, Mustafi, Ozil, Chambers, Kolasinac, Xhaka, Socrates, Bellerin, Ceballos, and Ceballos isn't even our player. We've got him on loan. Dave, who was on the show yesterday, make sure you tune in for yesterday's show. Let's talk Arsenal. We had a lot of discussions about January and Holding's new contract. And Dave says, I'd argue he is a better option than Mustafi and potentially Louise or Holding. He's better than, you might as well put stock in the guy that's going to be here in the long term and you've invested in over players that are going to have their contracts expire at the end of the season. That's what's really annoying. And Alex English says Tim Lewis has a lot of work to do. Now, I think a lot of Arsenal fans, myself included at the start until I've kind of done a little bit more research, have got very excited over the idea of Tim Lewis. I'm excited over the idea that we finally got like a man on the ground that's investigating. The little Sherlock Holmes of Arsenal, if you will. But there's a problem. Tim Lewis is a lawyer. Tim Lewis is not someone who is football savvy. He's not someone who's worked in the game over the course of his career. He's not someone who knows what the right managerial choice is. He's not the person that knows how to play a number 10 in the correct position. He's not the person that knows what players the club need to sign, where they're going to get him from, who does the best scouting, what countries are the best to try and scout from. He doesn't know any of that. He knows from a lawyer perspective, and he knows about business. He needs people around him that can inform him about the direct and the correct way in which a football club should be run. So we can all put our hopes and pin our hopes on Tim Lewis to come in and say, that needs to change, that needs to change, that needs to change. But that's all fine until you remember that Tim Lewis doesn't know much about the ins and outs of running a football club. He knows the ins and outs of lawyership, or law is the word. But in terms of the club, he doesn't know how to run a football club. And yet we're all pinning our hopes on Tim Lewis coming in and being the guy that's going to go, yep, that's not good enough, that's not good. Because he does. How does he know? How does Tim Lewis know how to run a football club and what decisions need to be made? He knows things from a business perspective, and if anything, that should worry you more. That should worry you more, that Tim Lewis is going to be thinking about the club from a business perspective. He's not going to be the guy that comes in and goes, right, I think we need to get a new coach because this William Saliba guy is not being played. No. He's going to be the guy that comes in and says that, yes, you're wasting too much money on transfers. You're wasting too much money on players that aren't giving enough. But Tim Lewis is not going to be the guy that turns around and says, we should have signed Szoboszlai. He's not going to be the guy that turns around and goes, we should have signed more players from the Premier League. Because he doesn't know that. He can be the biggest Arsenal fan in the world. He doesn't know the ins and outs of running a football club. So there's no point pinning your hopes on Tim Lewis coming in and saying, and I'm not saying that you were, Alex. That's not what I was saying at all. I'm just saying that in terms of him as a concept, as a case study to look at, he's not someone that Arsenal fans should be pinning their hopes on to change things at the club. Let me let you respond, Alex. You say, agreed, Tim doesn't know football, but he knows numbers, and numbers aren't adding up, and common sense tells you the investment hasn't been efficient. Yes, and I think I brought that up, Alex. I think he'll know his numbers, he'll know business, but it will not be the person that suggests this is the coach we need, this is the manager we need, this is the players that we need. So whilst he can turn around and say, like we all have, from our perspective as fans, as unintelligible people that haven't worked inside a football club of that level, if at all, we know that there's a problem. So he himself should be able to work out there's a problem, but he's the only person that can actually say something to KSE about it. But he's not going to be the guy that turns around and says, we should have signed this guy, unless he watches TGT and a few tactical breakdowns. JMC says, and the most important of the lot, having the right people in certain positions above Arteta and then the right manager. It's rotten from the top to bottom, and we will keep dropping until that's sorted, and that is a fact, and I agree with you. Kenneth says, Tom, if you know what is good for Arsenal, believe me, all need is an Arsenal fan, the passion. And I do not doubt for a second that Arteta and Edu have the passion for Arsenal Football Club. I don't doubt that. That's not the part of their game I doubt. It's their experience, it's their knowledge of being managers, it's their experience of being coaches, it's their experience of being technical directors at a club the size of Arsenal. That's what I have doubts about. I have no doubts about their passion and love for the club. I'm sure they love the club to bits. I'm sure they had the passion for the club as much as any other fan because they were players and they love the club too. But it's their experience and their decision-making that arguably could even be clouded by that passion and judgment and loyalty and friendship with some players that makes this a very, very difficult situation to deal with. Czech Perk says, I find Arteta's comments baffling. Surely he knows stats won't hide the truth and will only alienate him from the fans. I was planning on doing a show about his statistics. You've probably all read them by now. He came out and did like a press conference where he talked about stats and how we're unlucky we haven't won games. We had like a 3% chance of losing against Burnley and a 64% chance of winning against Everton, and we lost both. And you're sitting there going, you're probably cherry picking results. You're probably looking at specific results in where your models and metrics support your argument. But I bet there's loads of games across the season that either we won, like Man United or West Ham, for instance, where we were probably in the lower percentage chance of winning those games, and yet we did. So you can't cherry pick these examples because it doesn't work. It just doesn't fit. You can't just use stats that only support your argument. Trust me. I've learned that the hard way. Craig Barlow says, regarding Saliba, we as a club sometimes have to put faith in your player What Arteta did is inexperienced management. Saliba is better than most of the centre-backs apart from Gabriel and Luiz. Goose says it's obvious Arteta has ruffled too many feathers and the team has downed tools. Joe says, does Vinay have a shady past? And if so, it's incredible that he's... I don't know. I know nothing about his past. I wouldn't want to make any accusations because I don't know a thing about his past. But the thing is that we do know is he is still a very young guy for the position that he is in. That is what we do know. Iron Cub says, Runarsson having to deactivate his Twitter. Now, I tweeted this out this morning. I'm not 100% sure, having spoken to Mike, who's informed me, and having done a little bit of research, if this was done last night. If it was done last night, because of the abuse he's got, then every single Arsenal fan that sent abuse Runarsson's way, and I mean abuse, I don't mean criticism, there's a difference between criticism and abuse, but if you've gone onto his Twitter and you've tweeted him and you've slagged him off and you've abused him, you deserve to be feeling the emotions of where Arsenal are at right now. You deserve every inch of it, every second of it. You deserve that misery in your life because you're a horrible, horrible person. So we can all be critical. We can come on here and talk and chat and criticise all we like. But as soon as you start going and abusing players, abusing people, you take it too far. Now, we don't know if Runarsson's account was deactivated last night, or we don't know if it was deactivated previously for whatever other reason. But if it was deactivated last night because of abuse, and let's be real, it wouldn't be surprising. Some Arsenal fans, have a history of it. So it's disgraceful, it's distasteful, and I quite frankly would rather you weren't in our club. I mean, I've seen videos of people slagging off the manager, saying some horrible things about him and the players. They shouldn't allowed to be doing what they do, but they have. And people watch it. But going onto social medias and doing what people do there is it's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Tio Pes says, I can't think of another club as badly run as us since Blackburn and the Venkies. Peter Wilder says, it's not actually Runnarsson's fault. He doesn't seem to be good enough. Someone sanctioned the deal. I know, and that's another thing, is that we can criticise him quite rightly for some of the mistakes that he's made. But at the end of the day, he was picked, and I tweeted that last night, that why he was picked over Leno in a game against Manchester City in a cup quarter-final makes no sense to me. I don't know why, because it's not like Leno needs a rest. He's a goalkeeper. He should be able to play the game. So I don't understand that. I understand the Europa League, blood him in those games, but against Man City in a cup quarter-final, play Leno, man. Toby says, 100% I agree, Tom. Yesterday on Let's Talk Arsenal chat, we did say something about needing a backup keeper way before the game started, but do not abuse players. Exactly. There's a difference between criticising and abusing. And if you don't know the difference between those two, then you need to ask yourself a long, hard question. Tulip says, Arteta's managing steel will be seen in the next game when his 3 experienced players will be available back and what he does. Also, Edu's will be seen in this window. Let's hope. I'm interested to know who you think the 3 experienced players are, because I have a horrible feeling that that's Willian and Xhaka. So I'm interested to know what you think about that. Owen Young says social media is destroying our sport. As I've said all the time, I think identification, verification needs to happen for accounts. 100%. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, you should be verified through an identification to use those systems so that it is not possible for you to just throw abuse at people and say whatever the hell you like. That is what should be done. Wilson says Leno should have played yesterday against Man City. Oh, and by the way, anyone who doesn't agree with that, and I don't usually do this because everyone's entitled to their opinion, but if you don't feel that some form of identification, verification should take place, it's because you yourself are worried about being caught for something. That is the only reason. I've had someone suggest to me that are possible in terms of like identity theft, but there are ways of verification that you need to go through for plenty of other things. Plenty of other things. And if you're not comfortable putting your identity onto your social media, which is done in complete private behind layers and layers of software, it's not in the public domain, then you shouldn't use it. And it's as simple as that. It's as simple as, because if you're concerned about your identity being on there, it's because you're worried about being caught for something. And it's as simple as that. Goose says, give the job to Ian Holloway. He brings some positive energy to the club. Carnage says, completely agree, as long as it's not on Twitch. You see, you can't have one and the other. You can't have one and you can't not have the other. Wilson says, my mum can defend better than Mustafi. This is how bad it is becoming. I'm sure your mum's a great defender, Wilson. Don't say that. Gary says, why don't we press as a team anymore? We constantly see one player pressing and most sitting back. And I tweeted that out yesterday as well. I thought we used to press teams. I thought we used to have players that would press and push and force teams into mistakes, but we don't even press in our own half anymore, let alone the opposition's half or the halfway line. We don't even press in our own half now. That's the level that it gets to. And it's just a joke at this stage. Peter Water says, anonymous accounts shouldn't be allowed to tweet verified accounts either. I'm not saying that you aren't allowed an anonymous account. I'm not saying that you can't have an account which is like, hasn't got your real name, hasn't got your real picture. I'm not saying that you aren't allowed that. All I'm saying is that there should be behind that your identity, which the social media platform is aware of who you are. Not create a random email, create a random identity. You can have an anonymous account, all you like, but behind that should be who you are, your identity. That's what I'm saying. Paul Geyer says, Arteta keeps making the same mistakes game after game. Whether that's team selection, tactics, injured players, not being subbed off, relegation is inevitable this season. Peter Wilder says, Tom, maybe it's a result of congested schedule as well as the downturn in form. Most teams have reduced their pressing actions relative to last. Yeah, but it's even at the start of the season, Peter. Even at the start of the season. Other than the game against Fulham, West Ham we dropped, Sheffield United we dropped, and then we just continued to get worse and worse and worse with our pressing. We've had the whole of lockdown, you've had the whole of the summer to get your energy back, to keep your training methods up. I don't get it. I really don't. Oladapo says, hi Tom, I believe the lack of pre-season and COVID has limited most teams pressing bar Aston Villa. There's been a generally less pressing as written by the Athletic. And I'm not saying there's been less pressing. I'm saying there is no pressing. There's none at all. The pressing has gone. The only person that was pressing was Martinelli. I expect there to be a drop in pressing because of fitness situations, but a complete lack of it whatsoever is different. So I get your point, Oladapo. I really do. But in terms of pressing in general, it's dropped a lot for Arsenal in comparison to other teams. Other teams are pressing a lot more than us. And I can't see any dispute from that at the moment. Iron Cub says, just got to get through this. That's not, got to get through this upcoming Chelsea loss, and then we can be a little bit more hopeful. And 14 says, interesting, thought about identity variation would help curb the abuse and racism online. Yes, it would. It would, 100%. Craig says, Tom, do you think we'll get reinforcements in January? I don't. If we don't, expect the same. To be honest, Craig, reinforcements is not the top of my priority list. And we talked about this with Toby and Dave on yesterday's programme on Let's Talk Arsenal. If you haven't checked it out, please do. We talked about the fact that incomings is a second in this window. Outgoings is the priority. We have to get the deadwood out as soon as possible. We have to get out the infectious personalities that are spreading negativity throughout the squad, out the club. Get them gone. That should be the priority. Bring players in, yes, but we've already got a huge squad. A massive squad. So much that we can't fit everyone into our 25-man squad. So you need to focus, Edu, on getting players out before you get players in. Now, I still think we need to sign players. I'm not saying that we don't. But priority should be getting the players out as quickly as possible. And they should have already contacted clubs about taking our players. Contacted agents. Getting these players out as soon as feasibly possible. That's what we need to do. Manizon says, yes, Tom, why aren't you running Arsenal? Because I do this channel and they'd never employ me. Agree, says Craig. Robert says, next 5 games will decide Arteta's future. However, we could already be at a point of no return by then. It's like global warming at this stage. We've gone past the tipping point. Check Perk says, players will not leave if we don't buy out the contracts. Simple. Wenger and Gazidis era decided to give average players... It's not just them. It's not just them. They're not the only people that have given average players big money. Cedric He was given big money. Aubameyang was given money for a contract for the things that he's did, not the things he's going to be doing. The smart thing with Aubameyang would probably have been to say, if a club wants you, put a bid in. If they don't, I don't think giving him this contract is necessarily a good idea. I really don't. I've really changed my mind on it. I was sitting there in the summer thinking this is the best bit of business we could do, keep Aubameyang. But actually, when you think about it, we gave him a contract for the things that he's done, not the things that he was going to do between the ages of 31 and 33, which is a worry. Because if there's one thing you can guarantee about a footballer, 9 times out of 10, is what they give you during their ages of 28 to 30 is going to be a lot more than what they give you between 21 to 33. And that's a problem that we've got. That's an issue. Great content as usual, Tom. Thank you, Wilson. Much appreciate the compliment. Make sure you drop a like on the video. Tom R says, Tom, speaking of getting rid of leeches who are bleeding the club dry in terms of good vibes and finance, do you think we will lay people off or get them to sit it out? I think it's going to be a mix of the two. I think some players will refuse to leave, like Ozil. I don't see him going anywhere. Socrates, I feel, will move on. I hope he does. Mustafi, we could see leave. Barcelona have been interested, not because he's an amazing player, just because they need cover, and he'll be cheap. And he's obviously played in Spain before as well. Akene says, Tom, off topic, which part of the UK? I'm in the southeast, mate, so I'm tier 4. Woohoo! Can't go anywhere. Goose says, in all seriousness, when was the last time you watched Arsenal play a decent game throughout 90 minutes? The football is dross, and we still don't seem to be learning anything under Arteta. Throughout the 90 minutes, you'd have to say it was the FA Cup games and Fulham, and that's the last time. The Community Shield, maybe they're the last times I remember us playing a good 90 minutes of football. That is it. Oladapo says, I completely agree with your position and your comment about pressing. How do you think Emile Smith Rowe's performance is? Is he purely a cam, or can he develop into a box-to-box? I hope he stays as a cam. I hope he stays as a cam, because I think, and what really frustrated me about yesterday is he came on, I don't know if you noticed this, one of the first things that Emile Smith Rowe did when he came on is he played an incisive pass to Lacazette, who had a shot that hit the side netting from a tight angle. Yes, it was from a tight angle, but that's the first time I've seen a central player play an incisive ball to one of our forwards in the box like that. We've had the little touches, like we saw with Nketiah setting up Aubameyang, but I'm talking about an incisive through pass to one of our strikers between in the passing lanes, between the gaps in the defence. I haven't seen that for so long. So much so that I was like, oh my God. Like, I noticed that now. Like, I genuinely notice it as an exception. And that's why Emile Smith Rowe needs to play. Because no other player for Arsenal is doing that right now. No other player is playing those key incisive passes through the gaps in the defence. He's desperately needed in this team, and I hope that Arteta can see that. He's done something in every single game he's played for us this season. Martino says, question, do you think Lamptey would be a good signing? I think he's done better in the Prem than Max Aarons did last season. He's done very well, Lamptey. What I would say is that he's got a couple of injury issues. He would be expensive. Brighton don't like selling their players for cheap. But he's not a bad shout. He's not a bad shout at all. Clive, good to have you in the chat, mate. Good morning. Hope you're well, son. It'd be good to have you back on the channel as soon as possible. Says, get rid of the COVID squatters. Craig Barlow says, Tom, 100% agree on your Aubameyang point. To be fair, my Aubameyang point is very much, while Clive is here, a big reference to the Arsenal Vision podcast, very much down to listening to what Elliot has said about giving him a contract that he had did things for the things that he'd done rather than giving him a contract for the things that he will do. That was very much influenced by Elliot of the Arsenal Vision podcast, so make sure you check that one out. Peter Wilder says Barcelona are also in serious financial problems. Could they sign Mustafi on a pre-contract and pay some sort of small loan fee? Maybe. This is the thing. We need to start looking at avenues of exploitation in the market. We need to be more ruthless. We need to be clever about how we do things in the market. Liga this season have lost their TV rights deal, and there are going to be opportunities to sign players from that league for a lower fee than they would have. I'm not saying it necessarily has to be Aouar. I'm just saying that you need to look at that league, find some young players that you may be able to get on a real cheap deal while we can. It might be tricky because of Brexit. That's not a joke. Genuinely, it will be more difficult now. But it's something that we need to do that we haven't done, and we're not exploiting players enough. We genuinely don't exploit markets. We don't look at the clever routes into specific regions of the world, and we don't look at utilising the opportunities that come forward to us, and it's really frustrating. Iron Cub says Barcelona have been linked with Willian for years. Try it for a Willian Ricky Puig swap deal. I think you're pushing the boat out there a bit, Iron. I really do. I'd love Ricky Puig. I think he's a fantastic young player, but yeah, I mean, and Koeman doesn't want him. That's the weird one, is that Koeman is basically said he's surplus to requirements. Marcus says the French league is heading for financial turmoil. Time to scoop the players. Gary Hardy says, doesn't Aubameyang have incentives in his contract to take it from 250 to 350? Yes, he does. But you're still giving a contract to a player that's going to give you a less output than you would have done for the previous years, if that makes sense, Gary. But yes, he does have incentives. Cash Chuckers says, we've had painful losses before, but I never imagined that this club would be so depressing and so joyless. It's awful. Kene says, Tom, almost job is about what you have done, and that is why you have CVs. Arsenal management was not in the wrong. Yeah, but you also sign people based upon what they're going to do. You can't just sign players on for the things that they've done, especially in the world of football. It's not like the real world. Football's very, very different to the real world. You can't treat it as a mirror image. I understand that when you have a job, you look at someone's CV, you look at their experience when you give them that job, and you should never give someone a place in football for doing effectively nothing. But you also, and it still does work in some senses for the long term, is you're not going to employ someone. If we look at the reality of things, in football, retirement ages are in a player's 30s because their production drops. If you look at the real world, retirement age, average around 65 for most jobs, probably going more up the longer we stay. But the point is that you're not going to employ someone nearing their retirement age to do a big, big job in the long term and to solve those issues. The same with Aubameyang, is we've given him a contract to reward him for the things that he's done, when actually what he's going to be giving us over these next 2 to 3 years is less than what he has done. That is the probability of that is going to be much, much lower, that he's going to give an output that is greater than what he's already done. The probability of that is very low because it's just the way football works. And performances do typically tend to drop, especially for a striker of the style of Aubameyang that is very much focused around pace and running in behind. And he will have to adapt and change his game to more of a poacher as his speed diminishes, as his fitness diminishes, which it will do, because naturally that is what happens. Clive says, is Arteta overprotective of young players, or should he risk their development and play them? Clive, the situation at the moment is so dire. We're almost at a case of, for me, what is there to lose? Because you either protect the young players from a situation which the senior players can't get you out from, and so therefore you're stuck with the senior players continuing to play, continuing to get worse. The fan base and the opinion towards those players gets worse. The call for those young players to play gets bigger. And eventually there becomes a breaking point. And I feel that it's not about protection necessarily either when your young players are as good as the ones that we've got. I don't like the word young in itself can sometimes be a bit of a cloak over a player's quality. And I hate talking about that like that, especially for young players. It can happen. I mean, you look at Luka Modric at 35 and what he does now. But with young players, it's a fact that in the world of football today, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, there are a lot more of them doing a lot better than 18, 19, 20-year-olds were doing 20 years ago. Because coaching's getting better, scouting's getting better, we're finding these players at a younger age. And so the 18, 19, 20-year-olds of today are kind of like the 22s, 23-year-olds of 20 years ago. Because development has gone back. The development is happening earlier in these players' careers, and they're actually better than what their age would say 20 years ago. So I personally feel that likes of Smith Rowe, Martinelli, Balogun to a lesser extent, who, if we look at what he's done in the games that he's played, for me deserves an answer. So there you go. Thanks. There you go. ECQ says, funny how Arteta talks about footballing reasons for why some players do not play, but Arteta and the board should not be judged for footballing reasons. Yeah, I get the irony, ECQ. I still can't get over the whole footballing reasons about Ozil. And as I always say, whenever I bring up Ozil, I always want to maintain that I'm not saying that Ozil is the answer and would have solved all of our problems, but to turn around to the fans and say that it's footballing reasons specifically as to why we've not put our only senior central creative midfielder into the squad makes no football reasoning sense at all. So it's just a case you feel lied to, especially as someone that's really tried to back the manager, as I have. That's what's really frustrating. Duro says, come on, Tom. We were all for giving Aubameyang 3-year contract at the time. Now that his form is bad, we are questioning that decision. And Duro, what I'd say to that is that football is a game that happens so quickly that if there is no acceptance that opinions can change, if there's no acceptance that your mind can change, then you're in the wrong sport, because your mind will be changed. My mind's been changed this season drastically over lots of different things. I had someone tweet me yesterday. I tweeted a month ago. You probably remember the show when I did this. I said that I was happy to come on anyone's channel, anyone's platform, whatever, to talk about the reasons as to why removing Arteta was the wrong way to go about the situation. That was a month ago. And so a month later, when I get a tweet saying, do you want to explain this now? To me, it's silly. It's naive and silly to tweet me that, because one, I used the word current in the tweet a month ago, and look at how much has happened in that month since. Look how many games we've lost. The situation is very different. And I still think that the problems, as a lot of you know, go far, far deeper than just the manager. But with the manager, football is a situation based on results. It's a game that's based on winning. And if you stop winning, if you continually lose, it's much, much easier to remove the manager in hope of change than it is to remove the entire squad, which takes a lot longer to do. Or the process of the senior executive figures which are making the decisions and are very unlikely to move on. So tweeting a tweet that I said a month ago where I said, and I would be happy to come onto a channel and still explain why I had those feelings then, but now, a month later, so much has happened in football. And that's the problem with social media, again, if we go back to it, is that everything you say on social media is recorded. Everything you say on social media is stuck in time, in that moment. And it can be so easily taken out of context. And that is another problem with it. I've always been that feeling of all tweets should delete after a year. Maybe it should even be a month at this rate, being Arsenal fans. But it's very, very difficult, I think, you can't, and I've done it. Well, especially when I was a kid. I remember scrolling back through someone's Twitter timeline to find where they'd said something previously. And I look back on it and to myself, being self-critical and say, what are you doing that for, Tom? You're an idiot. Of course they were thinking differently back then. The situation was different. You can't judge someone based upon something they've said a month ago, especially in the world of football. Yeah, Owen, I know you've got a lot of deleting to do, mate, so you might want to jump on and get that. Carnage says, Tom, did you talk about Arteta's comments and Saliba? Yes, we did. So if you want to scroll back, if you're on Twitch, I don't know if you can. I don't really know how Twitch works. But if you jump onto the YouTube side of things, you can scroll back and listen to the comments on Saliba. Marlon Turner says, Arteta is the best thing that's happened to Arsenal. The true problems that was hidden over the years by Wenger's brilliance is now unfolding. This now wake up the owners. They are losing money. It might be a case that Arteta was the best thing to happen to the club if there weren't so many problems. Arteta may have been thrown into the fire when he really just needed a nice, cool pond to do his work. But that wasn't Arsenal. Arsenal was a flaming mess disaster that you threw in an inexperienced coach into, which is on the owners and on the senior executives who made that decision, ultimately. You can blame Arteta to a point, but at the end of the day, he was the one that was appointed by those guys as a guy that's never had a senior management role in his life to take on this job, the worst football job on the planet, arguably. The Arsenal job is, whilst attractive and a challenge, and certainly something that managers would relish, it's a huge flaming mess of you know what. So it's exceptionally difficult to try and do that. Peter Wild says, a month ago, no one would have thought twice about being in a relegation battle with how Fulham and Burnley are starting to look. A month from now, Arsenal may not be able to afford to keep Arteta. Exactly. Ans14 says, we all have Aubameyang signing the contract. He probably regrets it now. He might regret it now. He certainly might regret it now. Cash Chucker says, how old was Anelka, Henry, Tony Adams, Cesc? Play the kids. Exactly. It's another good point about youngsters. You can't protect them forever. At what point do they deserve to play and when the senior players deserve to be removed? It's a really good point. Midnight says, Arteta probably gets on the phone to Pep for a shoulder to cry on. Maybe. I know that they speak. They speak out of the... They speak not semi-regularly, so it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. Arteta speaks to a lot of people in terms to get like advice and not necessarily a shoulder to cry on, but certainly to consult. He speaks to plenty of people from within the game, but he doesn't listen to things from outside. Okay, that with 48 minutes on the clock is where we're going to end our what was just meant to be a press conference review, but it's turned into a bit of a Q&A. This is obviously your only show for a Wednesday because I work from 2 to 11 on a Wednesday, but I'll be back tomorrow on Christmas Eve to preview, not to preview, sorry. What are we doing on Thursday? There's not much on, so we'll have to see if there's any news that drops, because our game is, of course, on Saturday. So we'll have to see if some news drops. Maybe we'll get a tactical breakdown out. We'll have to wait and see. Friday is obviously Christmas Day, but it is the day before a game. So even on Christmas Day, we're going to squeeze in a preview for the Chelsea game on Sunday. Unless I do it tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll take a day off. But if you could appreciate the show by dropping a like on it, I really, really would appreciate it. Absolute legends, all of you. Always 100% behind me and the channel, which I appreciate. There's never any... 99.9% of the time, there's never any abuse in the chat. And it's a really nice place to be, as is our Discord server for our members. If you'd like to join up as a member and help support the channel and get access to our Discord server and the exclusive shows that come out throughout the month, and, of course, the emojis, which people I've been using in the chat just now, even though they're a little bit ironic. Then you can join up as a member. Check it out. Click the join button. There's a video there. It'll tell you all about what happens, and you can come on the show like we did yesterday. Dave and Toby, who are both members, came onto the show to have a chat, and that could be you. So help the channel, join up, and we can have a good chat. So I'll see you very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.